The Grand Palace Hotel breathed luxury in every detail. Crystal chandeliers reflected a golden light onto the marble floors, while staff in neat rows glided through the lobby as if they were floating. Among businessmen in suits and well-dressed ladies, one figure stood out: Maria, a young mother in simple clothes, holding her small son in her arms. Her timid footsteps echoed more than she would have liked, drawing looks of disdain. She walked with hesitation, holding her son tightly against her chest. Every stare cut through her skin like an invisible blade, reminding her that she didn't belong in that place. Still, Maria held on to a thread of hope. Maybe she could get a room for a few nights, a decent shelter for the boy to rest. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the muffled giggles that arose behind her. At the reception desk, a man in an impeccable suit watched her with cold eyes. Mauricio, the manager, was known for his strictness and arrogance, and he was already frowning at the woman's presence. He didn't need to ask anything. To him, her appearance said it all. Maria approached, her voice trembling, but still firm enough to ask about their rates. The silence that followed her words was heavy. Mauricio stared at her with a scornful smile, leaning over the counter as if he were dealing with a naive child. The tone he used was sharper than a slap. "Ma'am, this is no place for beggars." The entire lobby seemed to turn against Maria, as if every look was an accusation. Maria swallowed hard, trying to maintain her dignity. Her lips trembled, but she didn't back down. Her son, sensing the tension, began to cry softly, burying his face in his mother's shoulder. The innocent sound, instead of evoking sympathy, brought more disguised laughter from some of the people nearby. The manager, pleased with the scene, prepared to shoo her away. "You couldn't even afford the cheapest room here," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. The words echoed through the hall like a cruel verdict, sparking whispers among the guests. Maria blushed, feeling the shame wash over her. Her son, growing more nervous, squeezed his stuffed bear tightly, as if that object was his last safe refuge. The bear was notable only for its well-worn appearance: patched-up seams, fur that had lost its sheen, and slightly loose button eyes. To anyone else, it was just an old, worthless toy. But for Maria and her son, it was their one constant friend, a symbol of affection in the middle of their hardships. The scene created a brutal contrast with the glittering environment of the hotel. Mauricio, seeing he had the silent crowd's attention, decided to finish his humiliation. "The door's right over there, ma'am. Please don't disturb the actual customers." His gestures were broad and theatrical, as if he were performing for an audience that expected his usual show of power. Feeling the tears well up, Maria turned to leave, her son still clutching the teddy bear. Yet, even at the peak of her shame, she didn't lose her composure. She held her head high, took a deep breath, and walked toward the exit. Her heart felt heavy, but her steps remained firm. Every second seemed to drag on, every stare still burned, but there was something in her posture that, even humiliated, held a spark of dignity. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room as Maria moved toward the door. People watched, some with indifference, others with a sense of unease, but no one dared to intervene. Still, that moment was about to turn into something no one would ever forget. And if you believe that no one should be judged by their appearance, subscribe to the channel now and follow this story to the end. You will be surprised by the twist that's coming. When Maria was halfway across the lobby, something unexpected happened. Her son, still sniffling softly, loosened his grip, and the stuffed teddy bear slipped from his small hands. The toy hit the marble floor with a dull thud that echoed far more than it should have. The little boy tried to reach for it, but Maria, flustered, just kept walking, completely unaware of the detail that would change everything. The bear skidded a few inches, coming to a stop near the reception desk. A female employee with a look of mild contempt bent down to pick it up, but hesitated when she noticed something stitched onto its side. A small, old white tag discreetly attached to the seam. Curious, she leaned closer to look, murmuring a few words that caught the attention of those nearby. The tag, worn by time, still had a legible inscription. Auctioned for 1.2 million reales, historical toy collection. A murmur spread through the crowd like wildfire. The laughter stopped immediately. People who had been indifferent just moments before were now leaning in for a closer look. Manager Mauricio, confused, hurried over and snatched the bear from the employee's hand. He read the tag once, then again, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This has to be fake," he said in a rushed tone, trying to maintain control of the situation. Yet the unease in his eyes betrayed his insecurity. Some guests were already whispering among themselves, questioning the toy's authenticity. What was once a joke was now becoming an intriguing mystery. It was at that moment a middle-aged man in a simple suit approached the group. His eyes lit up the second they landed on the teddy bear. Without asking for permission, he knelt right there in the middle of the lobby, as if before a sacred relic. "It can't be! It is! The Ludwig bear! The centerpiece of the Figueiredo collection!" His voice was filled with reverence and emotion. The murmur grew into an even more intense buzz. Everyone was now looking not at Maria, but at the toy she had been carrying. The curator, visibly moved, explained that it was one of the rarest toys in the country, part of a legendary collection that had been missing for decades. The pieces had been auctioned off, and very few still existed. Confused, Maria slowly approached. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt that something big was about to change. Her son reached his little arms out toward the teddy bear, which the man was still holding carefully, as if it were made of glass. The crowd watched in absolute silence, waiting for the revelation to be confirmed. The curator stood up, looking at Maria with tears in his eyes. "Ma'am, you must have no idea what you're carrying. This toy belonged to your grandparents' collection. You are the legitimate heir to the largest recorded collection of antique toys in this country." The words echoed through the hall, leaving everyone stunned. Mauricio tried to intervene, stammering that it was impossible, but he had already lost control of the situation. The audience, now in a state of shock, began to look at Maria in a completely different light. Her image had transformed from intruder to heiress in a matter of minutes. Still in a daze, Maria hugged her son and received the bear back, now not just a symbol of a child's love, but the key to a destiny she could never have imagined. Even after the initial revelation, Mauricio didn't give up his arrogant attitude. He let out a nervous laugh, trying to win back the crowd. "An old teddy bear doesn't make this woman important," he said, raising his voice. But this time, his words were met not with laughter, but with suspicious and disapproving looks. The weight of the silence was palpable. Maria felt torn between the fresh humiliation and this new confusion. Her heart was racing, and she wondered if this was all really happening. She held her son tightly, as if the boy were her anchor in a storm of emotions. The teddy bear, now back in her arms, felt heavier. The curator approached and in a respectful tone asked to examine the toy more closely. He showed the crowd authentic markings that confirmed its legitimacy. He explained that Ludwig had been crafted by one of the first artisanal toy factories in Europe and brought to Brazil by renowned collectors. Its history left no room for doubt. Meanwhile, Mauricio was growing redder, trying to interrupt the explanation. "This has to be some mistake!" he exclaimed, but his voice no longer held the same authority. Some guests murmured words like shame, prejudice, and unacceptable. For the first time, the manager felt the audience was not on his side. Still frightened, Maria began to recall stories from her childhood. Her grandmother had mentioned old toys stored in a forgotten warehouse. Perhaps, she thought, there was truth in what the curator was saying. A lost memory was coming to life,
and quiet tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, but from a sense of recognition.
Maria's son, oblivious to the adult tension, smiled as he hugged his teddy bear again. That simple gesture moved many in the crowd, reminding everyone that beyond its monetary value, the toy held deep sentimental meaning. The contrast between innocence and prejudice became even more evident, touching even the most hardened hearts. Mauricio, realizing he was losing control of the narrative, tried to expose Maria as a fraud. "This woman came here to fool you all," he shouted. But his words sounded hollow, like the last gasp of his crumbling authority. The crowd no longer believed him. Some were even looking at him with open contempt. Then the curator made a symbolic gesture. He positioned himself beside Maria as her defender and ally. This woman is not an intruder, but the guardian of a historical heritage. The phrase resonated like a final judgment, ending the discussion. Maria didn't know how to react, but she felt a wave of strength rising in her chest. In that instant, something shifted inside her. The humiliation that had consumed her just minutes before was now transforming into a flame of dignity. For the first time in a long time, Maria didn't see herself as an outsider, but as someone with undeniable worth. Her gaze was no longer the same. There was a sparkle in her eyes. There was courage. The hotel lobby, once a stage for laughter and scorn, had become the setting for a revelation. Everyone knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Still confused by the sudden turn of events, Maria walked back toward the center of the lobby. People made way for her to pass, no longer with scorn, but with silent respect. Every step was filled with tension. Her son, however, didn't seem to mind the solemnity. He waved the teddy bear around just as he always had, unaware of the importance everyone now placed on it. Suddenly, the toy slipped from his small hands once more. It hit the floor, but this time everyone held their breath as if a crystal jewel were at risk. The same dull thud echoed again, but instead of laughter, it was met with a collective gasp. A guest rushed to pick it up, but stopped when he saw Maria walking toward it herself. Maria bent down slowly, her eyes fixed on the toy. When she picked it up, she felt the worn texture and the stitched seams she had noticed so many times before. But now, every detail seemed to hold a new meaning, as if the bear was speaking to her, revealing an ancient secret that had always been right in front of her eyes. The curator used the moment to explain more historical details to the crowd. He talked about the era when toys like that one were status symbols, imported at exorbitant prices. He also explained how the Figueiredo collection had mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind only records in auction catalogs. Maria listened intently, absorbing every word. At the same time, the pressure built inside her. She was used to being invisible, and now every eye was fixed on her and her son. The responsibility felt enormous, and insecurity hovered in her mind like a shadow.
Mauricio, still stubborn, tried to shift the focus by accusing the curator of making up a story. But the crowd was no longer listening to him. An elegant older woman, who had been silent until then, stood up and said in a firm voice, "The real mistake here isn't this toy, but the way you treated this mother." Her comment drew quiet, scattered applause. The manager swallowed hard, feeling cornered in his own domain for the first time. His hardened face revealed the internal struggle between his pride and his fear. Maria noticed his weakness, but said nothing. She simply held the teddy bear a little higher and hugged her son, as if that gesture was her final answer. In that moment, the toy was not just physical proof of an inheritance, but a symbol of the invisible strength Maria possessed. Her demeanor had changed. She was no longer the timid woman who had entered in shame, but someone who was beginning to recognize her own worth. The entire lobby seemed to reflect this shift. The curator, visibly moved, declared, "This is not just a toy. It's a living memory, a link between generations, and this woman is the bridge keeping it alive. His words resonated deeply, casting Maria as the central figure in something far greater than she had ever imagined. Fate was no longer working against her. For the first time, it seemed to be opening its doors in a grand way, as if every step was an invitation to take on a role in history she had never dreamed of occupying. With the lobby plunged into silence, the tag sewn onto the bear became the center of attention again. The curator, using white gloves he pulled from his jacket pocket, carefully examined the piece. He showed the auction inscription to those present, explaining that it was an official seal of authenticity. No one dared to interrupt his analysis. Mauricio, pale, was scrambling to find flaws to discredit the situation. "Those tags can be faked," he exclaimed, but his voice sounded fragile. The curator, calm and collected, replied that he had worked for over 20 years authenticating historical pieces and had never seen a forgery with such precision. His professional tone silenced any further objection. Meanwhile, Maria watched her son gently stroke the bear's worn ear. To her, it had always just been a comforting companion. Discovering that this object held a hidden fortune was beyond her imagination. Her eyes welled up with emotion, a mix of disbelief and gratitude. A group of guests moved closer to get a better look. Many murmured memories from their own childhoods, remarking on how simple toys could hold such immense meaning. The atmosphere, once scornful, was transforming into one of reverence. For the first time, Maria felt she was not an object of mockery, but of respect. The curator continued, explaining that the teddy bear was part of an extremely rare batch auctioned off years ago. He reported that the toy had been handcrafted in a limited edition, and that Maria's specimen was considered the best preserved one. His words captivated the audience, creating an almost magical mood. Mauricio, backed into a corner, tried to slip away discreetly, but he was stopped by the accusatory stares of the guests. Some were whispering about the cruel attitude he had shown just minutes before.
His figure, once a symbol of authority, was now becoming a byword for shame and intolerance. It was the beginning of his downfall. Maria hugged the teddy bear to her chest, as if to protect it from the world. As she did, she realized that beyond its historical value, the toy represented her own life's journey. Simple, mended, but full of hidden meaning. She felt there was something bigger at stake than just money. Her son, not understanding the magnitude of the moment, laughed an innocent laugh, relieving the tension. The pure, childish sound broke through the seriousness, reminding everyone that this bear was, above all else, a beloved toy. Many were moved by the scene. The curator then made a solemn declaration. "This object doesn't belong in a museum, it belongs to your family, but the world needs to know its story." Those words ignited a new sense of responsibility in Maria, who was beginning to understand that her destiny was about to change radically. In that instant, the hotel's luxury no longer seemed so impressive. The real value was in the tear-filled eyes of that mother, and the history being reborn before everyone. The man who had changed the course of that night introduced himself officially. His name was Dr. Augusto Lemos, a renowned museum curator and expert in historical toys. His reputation was known among collectors and scholars, which gave even more weight to his words. The audience listened intently, absorbing every detail. Augusto explained that he had dedicated a large part of his life to locating lost pieces of the Figueiredo collection, considered the most valuable in Latin America. He said that when he saw the teddy bear, he recognized it immediately. "I could never mistake Ludwig," he stated emotionally. His passion for his work was evident in every gesture. Maria listened in silence, feeling small in the face of the situation's grandeur. She couldn't comprehend how a life of hardship could be connected to such a rich inheritance. Her heart was torn between fear and hope. Her son, distracted, played with the bear's paw, completely unaware of the historical weight it carried. The curator approached Maria with respect and gentleness. "Ma'am, this toy is more than a relic. It is the key to a forgotten story. You are the heir to a legacy that needs to be shared with the world." Maria's eyes widened, surprised by the word heir. Mauricio tried to protest again, but his voice was drowned by quiet jeers. Some guests were already taking pictures, documenting a moment that would surely make the news. The manager, cornered, felt the ground giving way beneath his feet. The power that had until then seemed unshakable was crumbling in the face of the truth.
Augusto went on to explain that there was an international exhibition currently being planned and that Ludwig would be its centerpiece. Looking at Maria, he said she should be the exhibition's resident curator. The crowd reacted with astonishment, some even applauding the idea. Maria, however, nearly lost her breath at the unexpected responsibility. "Me? But I don't know anything about museums," she murmured, feeling insecure. Augusto smiled kindly and replied, "You know about love, dignity, and memory. That is more than enough. The rest we will learn together." His words touched her deeply. Her son, sensing his mother's emotion, hugged her tightly. That simple gesture made Maria feel that, despite her fear, she could accept the challenge, not for herself, but for her son's future. He deserved to see his mother recognized for her worth. The audience watched in reverent silence. The contrast between the initial humiliation and the honor now being bestowed upon Maria was so stark, it felt like a scene from a movie. In a matter of minutes, fate had completely turned the tables. And as Maria held the teddy bear firmly, there was no longer any doubt. That toy, once a symbol of simplicity, had become the key to a bright future. The silence in the lobby was broken by the curator's firm voice. Augusto revealed that Maria's family was part of the history of the Figueiredo collection, known for assembling rare toys from the 19th and 20th centuries. Many believed the collection had been lost, but the teddy bear was living proof that the legacy still existed. The crowd listened, fascinated. Maria, still in shock, tried to process this information. Her memory drifted back to childhood, vague stories her grandmother told about toys stored away in a warehouse. Back then, she thought they were just the nostalgic fantasies of an old woman. Now, everything made sense. The curator explained that the toys weren't just valuable objects, but also symbols of their time and culture. The Ludwig bear, for instance, had been handcrafted in a German factory in the early 1900s. Only 5 were ever made, and Maria's was the best preserved. As the revelations sank in, Mauricio fidgeted in the corner, feeling increasingly irrelevant. His eyes searched for support among the guests, but found only condemning stares. The arrogance he had displayed minutes earlier was fading, replaced by an aura of failure. Maria held her son, who was now dozing on her shoulder, and reflected on the weight of this inheritance. She had never seen herself as important. Now she was being presented with a responsibility that could change not only her life, but how the country viewed its own cultural memory. The curator then turned to the crowd and declared, "We are witnessing a historic moment. This woman didn't just preserve a toy, she saved a piece of our collective childhood." The statement drew spontaneous applause, and Maria felt herself blush, unsure how to react to all the attention.
She lowered her head, remembering how she had been met with scorn just minutes before. The contrast between the humiliation and the honor was almost unbearable. Yet an inner strength was beginning to grow.
a desire to protect and value what had for so long been seen as just a worn-out piece of cloth. Mauricio tried to interrupt, saying it was all just a coincidence, but no one listened to him anymore. The manager, once the master of his environment, was now just a pathetic figure trying to defend a crumbling castle. His voice sounded weak, like a distant echo. Ignoring him, the curator placed a hand on Maria's shoulder and said, "You are not alone. We will help you reclaim this story." For the first time, Maria felt confidence in the words of someone who believed in her worth. Her fear began to make room for a timid but very real courage. The lobby, once a stage for prejudice, now seemed to witness the emergence of a new protagonist. Maria, the heir to a story that could move the entire world. Mauricio couldn't stand to see the attention slipping from his grasp. He felt diminished, exposed before guests who had once feared him. In desperation, he decided to take drastic action. He strode over to the curator and tried to snatch the teddy bear from his hands, claiming he needed to verify its authenticity himself. His aggressive move drew gasps of shock from the crowd. Augusto immediately stepped back, shielding the toy firmly. "Do not touch this piece, Mr. Mauricio. You have already done enough damage with your arrogance." The curator's stern tone surprised everyone, making it clear he would not tolerate any further abuse. The manager stood stunned, realizing he had lost every last shred of his authority. The guests began to speak up loudly. "Disgraceful," said a woman in a blue dress. "He should apologize," added a businessman. The criticisms grew, creating an atmosphere of public judgment. Cornered, Mauricio looked around like a trapped animal with no way out. Maria watched in silence, feeling a mix of vindication and compassion. As much as she had suffered, she didn't wish for anyone's destruction. Her son, awakened by the commotion, got scared and clung to his mother's neck, seeking protection. That gesture reminded her of what truly mattered: her family's dignity and safety. Mauricio still tried to justify himself. "I was only trying to protect the hotel's image," he said in a desperate tone. But his excuse sounded weak in the face of so many witnesses to his contempt just minutes earlier. People shook their heads, disappointed by his attempt to manipulate the situation. Seizing the moment, the curator declared that he would formally register the discovery, and that the hotel would now be known not for its exclusivity, but for being the stage of a historic revelation. His words were met with applause, further cementing Mauricio's downfall. The manager, with nowhere to run, began to sweat. His once haughty posture was replaced by a look of utter defeat. It was clear he had lost the respect not only of the guests, but also of his own staff, who now looked at him with cold and distant expressions.
Maria took a deep breath, realizing that even without saying a word, she was winning. Her simple presence, once ridiculed, was now becoming a symbol of resistance against injustice. The teddy bear, silent in her arms, seemed to carry an aura of triumph. The hotel's management, already informed of what had happened, sent a message demanding an immediate explanation from Mauricio. His face grew even paler as he read the notification. The end of his career at that establishment was effectively sealed. And so, in a matter of hours, the man who had humiliated her in front of everyone became an example of shame, while Maria, once invisible, emerged as the most important person in the room. The atmosphere was still charged when the curator spoke again, this time looking directly into Maria's eyes. "Ma'am, you are not just the heir to a toy. You are the guardian of a collection that has touched generations." His words were solemn, and the entire lobby waited for him to continue. He then revealed that an international exhibition was being prepared, bringing together rare pieces from around the world. "Ludwig, the bear your son is holding, is the missing piece we need to open the show, and I would like you to be the resident curator of this exhibition." The invitation landed like a bomb among those present. Maria's eyes widened, surprised and frightened. "A curator? But I don't know anything about that," she stammered. Her voice trembled, reflecting the weight of the responsibility. She didn't see herself as someone capable of taking on such a grand role, especially in front of so many experts. The audience reacted with spontaneous applause. Many were moved by the idea of this humble woman, once humiliated, now assuming a position of such importance. The contrast was so powerful, it turned the scene into a true spectacle of triumph over adversity. A desperate Mauricio tried to laugh off the proposal. "This is ridiculous. A woman like her can't represent anything." But his outburst only provoked scorn from the crowd. For the first time, the power of words was no longer in his hands, but in Maria's and the curator's. Her son, not understanding the seriousness, looked at his mother with innocence and whispered, "Mommy, can you take care of my teddy bear forever?" The simple, pure phrase touched Maria deeply. It was as if fate had spoken through the child. Augusto smiled, sensing her hesitation. "This isn't just about technical knowledge, Maria. It's about love, memory, and dignity, and that is something you have in abundance." The conviction in his words offered an anchor in the midst of her swirling emotions. Maria took a deep breath, trying to absorb the offer. Her heart was racing, and a mix of fear and hope pulsed through her veins. She knew her life would change forever if she accepted. The audience watched in anticipation, waiting for her answer. The contrast was overwhelming. Just minutes before, everyone had mocked her. Now they awaited her decision with reverence.
Maria hadn't said yes yet, but in that moment, something inside her began to change. The seed of courage had been planted, and it was about to bloom. After the offer, Maria stepped away to a quiet corner of the lobby, still holding her son and the teddy bear. She needed a moment to breathe. The words echoed in her mind, "Resident Curator." The weight of the title frightened her, but it also stirred something that had been dormant inside her. She remembered the years of struggle, raising her son alone, working jobs that barely covered the basics. She had grown accustomed to being invisible, ignored, and judged by her appearance. Now, for the first time, she had the chance to be recognized not for what she lacked in life, but for what she carried. But insecurity gnawed at her. "What if I fail? What if they laugh at me again?" she thought, her heart feeling heavy. The fear of being rejected once more was almost unbearable. Mauricio's arrogant face still haunted her, a reminder of the prejudice she had always faced. The curator approached her calmly, respecting her space. "Maria, you don't have to be afraid. I will be by your side. The world doesn't need a cold specialist. It needs someone who carries the truth in their heart." His voice was firm, yet comforting at the same time. Maria looked at her son, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. She realized that all she had ever wanted was to give him a decent future. Perhaps this was the path to that. Perhaps accepting the role of curator was more than an invitation. Perhaps it was a mission. Still, her internal conflict persisted. Was she capable of facing journalists, business people, and art critics? The responsibility seemed too great for someone who, just hours before, had been shooed away like an intruder. Suddenly, she remembered her grandmother's words, "The greatest treasures aren't made of gold, but of stories." The memory warmed her heart as if a voice from the past was guiding her forward. Maybe it was time to accept that her life held more value than she had ever believed. While she was reflecting, the hotel staff began preparing an impromptu press conference as members of the media started arriving. Maria felt the weight of the decision drawing closer. There was no turning back now. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed the teddy bear to her chest. In silence, she made the first important decision of her new life. She would no longer let fear be her prison. The war inside her wasn't over,
But for the first time, Maria believed she had a real chance to be free. While Maria wrestled with her fears, news of the discovery had already spread. Cameras and reporters flooded the lobby, eager to document the event. A desperate Mauricio tried to position himself as the hotel spokesman, but he was interrupted by a direct call from management themselves. The message was final. He was fired, effective immediately.
The crowd reacted with surprise, but not outrage. On the contrary, many applauded quietly, satisfied to see arrogance finally receive its due punishment. Humiliated, Mauricio left the reception desk with his head hung low, silently carrying the weight of his own ruin. Maria watched the scene in silence, feeling that fate had served justice. For a moment, she even felt pity for the man who had insulted her, but she quickly remembered the humiliation she had endured just minutes before. It was as if life itself had taken charge of giving her an answer. The curator seized the moment to make the offer official. In front of the cameras, he declared that Maria would be the new resident curator for the Treasures of Childhood exhibition, to be inaugurated at the hotel itself. The choice was not only fair, but symbolic. The place of her humiliation would be transformed into a stage for celebration. The audience buzzed with approval at the decision. Many guests who had previously looked down on her now approached her with expressions of respect. Maria, still timid, thanked them with small gestures, but felt a warmth in her chest she had never experienced before, the warmth of recognition. Meanwhile, Mauricio left the hotel to the sound of scattered jeers, carrying his public shame with him. His empire of authority had crumbled in a matter of minutes. The image of the haughty manager was now just a ridiculous memory. Maria, on the other hand, was met with camera flashes and questions from journalists. The contrast between their two fates was striking. One fell into ruins, the other rose with dignity. Life seemed to be writing an epic turnaround right there and then. Her son, awakened by the commotion, smiled at seeing all the attention. He held the teddy bear and held it up high, as if he knew that object was the true protagonist of the night. The gesture drew laughter and applause from the crowd. Emotionally moved, Maria kissed the boy's forehead. She felt she wasn't just living a unique moment, but was opening a path for his future. This was more than an invitation. It was an opportunity to rebuild their entire life. And in that instant, she knew she wouldn't turn back. The fear was still there, but courage was beginning to speak louder. The following days were a whirlwind of transformation. The Grand Palace Hotel, once a stage for luxury reserved for a select few, began preparations to host the Treasures of Childhood exhibition. Halls were adapted, display cases installed, and spaces organized to tell the story of the toys that had defined generations. Maria, now officially introduced as the resident curator, took a hands-on role in every decision. Guided by Augusto, she learned quickly about cataloging, conservation, and exhibition design. Though she still felt insecure at times, her dedication was clear, and her human touch and sensitivity won over everyone.
The hotel staff, who had once been indifferent, now treated her with respect. Many employees even apologized for having laughed at her on that first day. Maria accepted their gestures with humility. Knowing she didn't need revenge, her greatest victory was simply being there, occupying that space with dignity. The Ludwig teddy bear was prepared as the exhibition's centerpiece. A special glass display case was designed to house it, but Maria insisted that for the opening ceremony, it should be presented in her son's arms. This toy is more than history. It's about affection, and affection should be shown as something living, she said, moving the entire team. As she worked, Maria began revisiting family memories. She discovered other toys stored away in old storage units, confirming the scale of the inheritance she carried. Each piece held a story, and she began to feel not just like a curator, but like a guardian of childhood itself for thousands of people. News of the exhibition spread across the country and beyond. International journalists confirmed their attendance, and Maria's name appeared in newspapers and websites. For many, her story became a symbol of overcoming prejudice. For others, it was proof that true worth isn't measured by appearances. Her son observed everything with childish curiosity. He ran through the temporary exhibition halls, his eyes sparkling as he looked at the toys. For him, it was all a grand adventure. For Maria, it was building a secure and honorable future for her child. Augusto, always by her side, kept reinforcing her confidence. "You were born for this, Maria. It doesn't matter where you started, but where you're going." His words became a mantra that helped her through the anxiety of preparation. As the opening day approached, Maria felt the weight of expectations. The hotel lobby, once the stage for her humiliation, was now the setting for a new version of herself. Every detail represented a silent victory. And deep down, she knew this exhibition wasn't just about toys. It was about stories, dignity, and the strength to never give up. The opening day arrived with a different kind of brilliance. The Grand Palace Hotel, once closed in its own ostentation, now welcomed families, journalists, and scholars from everywhere. The lobby shimmered, but not just from the chandeliers. There was a new energy in the air, a collective anticipation of witnessing something historic. Maria, in a simple yet elegant dress, walked through the hall with her head held high. Beside her, her son proudly carried Ludwig, as if he were the guardian of a secret treasure. The looks that once held contempt were now filled with admiration and respect. Cameras followed her every move. To many, Maria had become a symbol of resilience, a woman who had transformed humiliation into victory. The contrast between this moment and the night she'd been thrown out still echoed in the memory of everyone present. Curator Augusto opened the ceremony with heartfelt words. "Today, we celebrate not just the preservation of antique toys, but human dignity, and no one represents this lesson better than Maria." The audience responded with a standing ovation, and quiet tears welled up in her eyes.
Her son lifted the teddy bear high above his head, drawing smiles from the audience. The image was captured by dozens of cameras and would soon spread around the world as a symbol of innocence and the power of love. Then Maria was invited to speak. The microphone felt heavy in her hands, but she took a deep breath and found her courage. "I'm not a museum expert. I'm just a mother. But I know that every toy here tells a story, and stories deserve respect." Her simple words touched everyone's hearts. The audience responded with warm applause. Many wiped away tears, moved by her authenticity. This wasn't a rehearsed speech, but genuine testimony from real life, filled with truth. As she walked among the display cases, Maria remembered the day she had been ridiculed. The same marble floor now reflected her victory. Every detail seemed to conspire to transform her pain into triumph. Watching from a distance, Augusto smiled with satisfaction. He knew he had chosen the right person to represent this legacy. It wasn't about technical knowledge, but about heart. And Maria had plenty of that. The opening wasn't just the start of an exhibition, but the beginning of a new story, written before everyone's eyes. With the exhibition now open, visitors moved between display cases, admiring antique dolls, wooden cars, and vintage games. Each piece had a small plaque with historical information, but what captivated people most was how Maria explained the stories behind them. Her gentle voice conveyed genuine emotion, making everything feel more human. Journalists gathered around her asking about her journey. Maria answered with humility, always emphasizing that her greatest achievement was her son's smile. "If he's proud of me, then I've already won," she would say. This simplicity won everyone over.
A group of children entered the main room and approached the display case where Ludwig was exhibited. They were mesmerized by the teddy bear. Maria asked her son to hold it for a few moments and show it to the children. The gesture drew spontaneous applause from those watching. That moment proved that Ludwig wasn't just a rare object, but a bridge between generations. The toy, once hidden in anonymity, now brought strangers together in a collective celebration of memories and affection. This was the essence of the exhibition, turning luxury into humanity. Maria stepped onto the makeshift stage once more to conclude the opening event. She looked out at everyone and said, "The clothes we wear or the places we're from don't matter. What truly defines us are the stories we carry with us." Her words echoed through the hall.
The audience gave her a standing ovation, visibly moved. Some people were crying, others smiled with tenderness. The atmosphere wasn't just celebratory, but one of deep reflection. Everyone left carrying a lesson they would never forget. Overcome with emotion, Augusto approached her and whispered, "You're not just the curator of this collection, Maria. You are a curator of memories." She smiled, recognizing that she had, in some way, found her true purpose in the world. Meanwhile, the international press broadcast the event live. Images of Maria, her son, and Ludwig spread across the globe, turning their story into a universal symbol of dignity. The former manager, Mauricio, watched from afar on television. His defeat was public and absolute. But for Maria, what mattered wasn't his downfall, but the quiet rise she was now embracing. That night, as the hotel lights went dark, Maria knew her life would never be the same again. The days following the opening were marked by profound changes in Maria's life. The Treasures of Childhood exhibition became an immediate success, attracting visitors from different countries. Her name was in the newspapers, not as a victim of prejudice, but as a symbol of dignity and resilience. Maria, once invisible, now walked confidently through the hotel corridors, greeted with respect by everyone. Staff who had once laughed at her now treated her with warmth. For many, her story had become a living lesson about not judging by appearances. Her son, innocent and unaware, enjoyed the new reality with a child's joy. He ran through the halls and laughed at seeing so many photographers interested in his teddy bear. To him, Ludwig had never been anything more than a beloved toy, and that reminded Maria of the true value of simple things. Invitations began arriving from international museums. Paris, New York, Tokyo, they all wanted to host the collection, of which Maria was now the guardian. The prospect of traveling the world was daunting, but also enchanting. For the first time, she saw horizons that had once seemed unreachable. Amid all the recognition, Maria never forgot her roots. She remained simple, choosing to walk with humility. "I'm no different from any other mother," she would say, always emphasizing that her strength came from her love for her son and the memory of her family. This authenticity was what made her most special. One night, alone in her hotel room, Maria reflected on everything. She thought about the day she was humiliated, thrown out like an intruder, and she smiled a bittersweet smile. That moment of pain had transformed into a bridge to something greater. Life, she concluded, always finds a way to reveal the truth.
Curator Augusto remained by her side as both a mentor and a friend. He constantly reminded her that her mission wasn't just about displaying toys, but about preserving the collective childhood of generations. Deeply moved, Maria took this mission to heart as her life's purpose. Her speech from the opening ceremony continued to resonate with people. "What defines us are the stories we carry." This phrase became both a headline and the exhibition's motto, repeated by thousands around the world. Without even realizing it, Maria had become a powerful voice against prejudice. As the event concluded, Maria walked through the now empty and silent lobby. She put her son to bed, kissed his forehead, and placed Ludwig beside him. The toy, once an object of ridicule, was now a bridge between past and future, a symbol of a story that would never be forgotten. And so the young mother who had once been mocked transformed into a curator of memories. Her future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. But in her heart, the greatest victory was already secure, teaching her son that true inheritance isn't found in the clothes we wear, but in the stories we carry. This story has shown that real worth isn't in the clothes we wear, but in the stories we carry. If you believe that too, subscribe now and join our community for more inspiring stories that turn pain into triumph.